Good morning. Day 272. Look at the beautiful fall color starting to happen here. And we got a little misty steam coming off of the water, excuse me. The sun is back there behind the trees. It is risen. So we're going to talk about 1 Corinthians chapter 4. And I guess before I dive into that, I know a few people will tune on and wonder how Florida is. And our particular area really dodged a bullet. I don't even think the immediate area where we lived got flooded or lost power. But I certainly am sending lots of prayers. I know a lot of people that are probably waking up to property damage or learning about it from a distance in areas south of us. I may even head down that way to see if we can help in some way. Anyway, so for those of you that are not listening real time and may be listening to this at some point in the future, this is September 29th of 2022, and we're talking about, in particular, talking about Hurricane Ian coming through Florida, and we have a home down there. So anywho, back to our reflection of the day, my reflection of the day that I would like to share with you. And that is 1 Corinthians chapter 4. And I'm titling today Having a Clear Conscience, because that's how Paul starts off this section of his letter is, look, I have a clear conscience. And he's already talked about that some, like the importance of having a clear conscience, but doing what's right for you and being respectful of where others are. And that allows you to meet where others, just because you have a clear conscience doesn't mean that if somebody else is in a different place with their beliefs, faith, lifestyle, and they're doing something different than you, and maybe also having a clear conscience of that you kind of just defer, to them. And he gives that, hot topic of the day back then was food. And if maybe a Jew or a Gentile feels okay eating meat or certain things, but they're in the company of somebody that doesn't, that you, even though you have a clear conscience about it, you don't eat the meat and cause somebody else to stumble. So he's kind of going back to that conversation, circling back to that. And I think that was even back in Romans. Yeah. So he is having the similar conversation with the Corinthians. It's important to have a clear conscience, but what does that mean? And what does that give you license to do? So he's going to have maybe a similar conversation using a little bit different examples and words, but this is an important distinction, and it's it's one that we have to also be careful of. Having a clear conscience does not mean you are right. It might mean that you think you're right. Here's what it really means. It means I'm doing my best, really. And that's all any of us can do. We can just do our best with the information that we have at the time. That's how we get a clear conscience. Have you ever felt that way? Like when you're doing your best, it does allow you to have a clear conscience. But if we're not careful and we're not keeping that attitude of humility and humbleness and staying in our own lane and having respect for other people, allowing, accepting, we can like that say, well, I have a clear conscience, so I'm right and you're wrong. And he's saying, don't do that. Be careful. I'm not doing that either. I know that I might not be right. I'm doing my best. And then he also, in this same conversation, is talking about an analogy of leadership, of being a manager. And so that he humbles himself simultaneously with the words about a clear conscience, and that doesn't mean I'm right. But at the same time, he's going in with a reminder of his authority, his spiritual authority and position that God has put him in with respect to their church. So, very deft, very nuanced distinctions there so that he can be heard. He's being respectful of where they are. But he's coming in with some authority too, saying, look, think of a situation where somebody's a manager. They are responsible for their job as manager, and they have a higher authority than them. That's who they're ultimately responsible to, not to the people being managed. The responsibility to the people being managed is that he's respectful, but he's firm in his authority. That's kind of an interesting, really sitting with that and looking at ourselves in the mirror and what he's role modeling here, because he goes on to have a kind of a come to Jesus talk with the Corinthians, literally. You guys thought that nobody was watching you and that I wouldn't come back or I wouldn't hear about this, so that you could, we laid a firm foundation of Jesus that you accepted and received, but now you're kind of doing your own thing. So what happens with a structure that has positions of authority within it and leadership, that it can become very vulnerable to if there's not checks and balances in place, is that there will be people that will be opportunistic, and that will come, wolves in sheep's clothing, that will come in and say, ooh, I have an opportunity for some authority here, and to be right and king of the hill, and I can talk the talk, but not walk the walk, and come in and have my own egoic self fed, get power, get recognition, get honor and respect, all those things, while sounding very much like a believer. So he's saying, be careful. I see what's happening. I'm getting messages. And I beg you, please, I am truly a position in authority appointed by God to be one of his messengers. And I'm not going around anywhere getting any kind of honor. I'm getting spit on. I'm getting beaten. I'm going hungry at times. This is what being an authority for Jesus really looks like. When you're really walking the walk, you're not going to be liked. You're not going to be honored. You're going to be despised in Jesus' name. So y'all are living a false system over there. You're setting up your own. So he's continuing that conversation from yesterday. So wow, that is like a big distinction, you all. I'm just going to circle back to those words and ask you to read them and meditate on what they mean for you. And having a clear conscience is, what allows us to sleep at night, allows us to live in peace and harmony. Maybe. That's what he's saying here. If you're not careful and you don't understand the difference of being right and having a clear conscience, you won't live in peace and harmony. You're going to go right back to the drawing board and create the problems that the ego and pride and all of those create in community. And you're not even going to know it. You're going to go on in false beliefs thinking that you've got it together. Don't be deceived. Don't be deceived. Know that you know that you know that you don't know. And all we can do is do our best. And he says, I don't even have the eloquent words. I don't even know if I can trust my own judgment sometimes. But I know that God appointed me. And I know that I'm doing my best. So I have a clear conscience. But I also know that doesn't mean that everything I do and say is right. There's a difference. There's a big difference. And that difference, if you hold yourself to it and reflect on it, will cause you to be humble and humbly respectful of other people and how you communicate. And especially when you're in a position of authority. He's first obligated to God, not for making the people feel better and just giving them a pass. He's saying, I know you're probably doing your best too, but you need to also do the same thing I'm doing here and realize that that doesn't necessarily make you right. There is a difference. And when you leave room for doubt, leave room for the possibility that you're wrong, but you're doing your best with what you have, with what you know at the time, then you can move in a way that will cause other people to take notice. And maybe listen more to what you have to say. Although it was evident people are people. They love to put other people on pedestals and love to have a power structure. It brings safety and security and all of those things, but it's that's the ego's version of safety and security. And true safety and security and love comes from God. And also from knowing that you just don't have all the information. There's no way you can be right. And anytime we even start to use language like that, like I'm trying to be really careful of that now myself, of right and wrong, good and bad, that creates, right there, that even creates problems for us. Because in order for me to be right, somebody else has to be wrong. So he's saying, don't fall into that trap. Just do your best, have a clear conscience, have your direct line of authority. And right now, God has put me in a spiritual authority position over you. So listen to me and not some of these people that are trying to, from their own ego structures, put themselves in authority. This is paradoxical stuff as normal. So anyway, it's cold. My hands are freezing. I'm going to put them in my pocket so I can warm up for the day. But rise and shine. Have a great day wherever you are. And think about this, this little conundrum that we've been put in. How can you have a clear conscience and not think of yourself as right?